drink, pictures, book. Let's do this. So let's start with number 1. Slasher. A teenage horror film fan decides to tool up and take down a serial killer that's been terrorizing her town. Slasher was the first film that I ever wrote. It was the first screenplay I actually tried to take seriously in terms of practicing and writing. This is the first draft, like a hard copy of the first draft that I still have. 82 pages. I clearly didn't know what the hell I was doing. So our main character is Laura Lee, a teenage horror fan. She just likes horror movies. She watches them and she always like gets a kick out of watching victims get killed by killers in stupid ways. Like she watches the high-end stuff like Halloween and Friday the 13th, but also like the low-rent stuff like Prom Night. One day she goes to school and she's with her friend Claire, and Laura notices police cars outside the school. And Laura's like, what are they doing here? And Claire's like, oh, 2 kids at school got murdered last night. And Laura's like, what? The 2 of them meet up with their other friends, Brendan and Andrew. And Brendan is like, oh yeah, did you hear? Like Judy and Matt, they got totally slaughtered, like in Judy's house. Like Matt was like pinned to the door, to the front door like that, with his guts hanging out. And Judy's body was found in the cupboard under the stairs, like all like with knife wounds. And then her head was found in the bedroom, and they're all like, shut the fuck up, Brendan. Laura's like, that does not sound likely. Like that sounds like something out of a movie that I would watch. Although we know, because the opening sequence was that murder scene, and Brendan's not exaggerating, it pretty much was like that. Just blood and scares, and there's a fucking serial killer hacking teenagers. That's the world we're in. We then meet up with the group friends of the victims. So it follows these 2 separate groups. There's Laura Lee's group of friends who are kind of like, they're well liked but they're not like popular. And then the victims group, which are pretty much like your standard teen victim pool in a horror movie. One of them being Emma Campbell. Emma Campbell is a neighbour of Laura Lee. They share like their back gardens kind of meet up in like the block. And Emma obviously finds out about her friends dying in this horrific way. And is traumatized, and when she leaves with her group of friends, she sees someone down the road from the school, like in the distance. And it's pretty much that scene in Halloween where Laurie Strode keeps seeing Michael Myers everywhere. There's a difference between a love letter and just a flat out rip-off. I'm sorry. That night, Laura Lee is having dinner with her mum, and it becomes clear that there's some tension there, and that there might be they allude to something tragic that happened to Laura like a year before. Laura Lee goes into her back garden just to like clear her head and just get away from the tension that's going on between her and her mum. And she spots Emma, Judy and Matt's friend, the victim's friend, in her back garden, like obviously crying and just grieving. And Laura's like, hey, are you okay? And Emma's like, oh, yeah, hi. Because they kind of know each other, like they share classes, but they're not really friends. But Laura goes up to him and is like, look, I know what you're going through. Kind of, I lost my dad like a year ago to like this horrific thing. And that kind of, she doesn't go into detail, but that kind of starts the bond. Just, let's clap for bonding. Emma is then like, hey, do you want to get out of here? Because I don't really want to go back inside because my parents are like kind of doting on me and like trying to take care of me. And Laura's like, yeah, I don't want to go back in there, my mum either. Let's just go, let's take a walk. So they take a walk and they go by the park. Meanwhile, in the park, 2 of Emma's friends, George and Charlie, are getting stoned because teenagers in horror films. And it's another scene where the killer's out, let's get the stoners. The killer kills Charlie, George runs out the park, bumps into Laura and Emma, and they're like, what the hell? And George's like, there's a fucking killer! The killer's coming through the park, they all see them. Emma and George are like, fuck, run. They run. Laura's like, holy shit, because she's a horror movie fan and she's seen a real life horror, like masked killer. This is like a proper Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees type. And she's like, that's fucking, I mean, terrible. And Emma and George are like, no, fucking run. And she's like, yeah. So there's a bit of a chase scene. They try and escape through the woods that kind of outline the park. Laura gets a log because the killer's closing in, and she just goes, like thumps him and then carries on running. They finally make it to the street and they seem to have gotten away. And Emma's like, the fuck was that? And I was like, what? It's like, you just tried to take him on. And I was like, I don't know, like instinct, survival instinct, I guess. And I was like, okay. But now Laura has seen that there's a proper serial killer, masked slasher in her town. And the next day, she's looking through all of her, like a horror movie collection, and she sees the article in the paper about the recent serial killings. And she's like, I know more about slasher movies than anyone, and we are in a slasher movie now. If I was smart about this, she's not smart about it, I could take this guy on. So basically what this becomes is Kick-Ass meets Halloween. Like that. Just Kick-Ass, Halloween, yeah, like that. And it's a kind of hero origin story meets a slasher movie. Ah, that's good pitching. It's my love letter to the slasher film genre while trying to create a new horror hero. Because with horror movies, you always remember the villains more than the heroes. You remember Jason, you remember Freddy, you remember Michael Myers, you remember Jigsaw. Name me the fucking hero in the Saw movies. Any one of them. Because there's been so many. But you always remember Jigsaw. I knew I couldn't create a new horror villain in the same caliber as Jason or Freddy. But there hasn't been an iconic horror hero since Ash from The Evil Dead, Bruce Campbell. And I thought, I want to create the next horror hero. And my version of a horror hero is a teenage girl who loves horror movies. Because A, writers so get in movies because I'm a hack, and B, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There's some fun stuff in it, but it became clear as I was reading back on it, I'm like, Laura Lee fucks up a lot. More people die than she saves. She gets two of her best friends killed when they realise what she's doing and kind of inadvertently get involved, and the killer takes them down. That was the other thing. The killer didn't really have a name. Well, I had a name for him in my head, but I didn't want to have that scene where there's like a police psychiatrist going like, well, yes, the killer, this is his name, and he's been having dark thoughts since he was a child, and blah, blah, blah. Have you seen his eyes? They're dark eyes. Didn't want that scene. Just have it all taken from the perspective of Laura Lee. There's stuff I read back and forth that would never happen. The finale is set in a B&Q store, because anything in a B&Q store can be a weapon if you use it differently. And the subplot was that both of Laura's friends, Brendan and Andrew, had worked there. Andrew takes Laura and Emma to the B&Q store for the finale, be like, oh, I work here because, and so I know all the codes. He's a 17-year-old kid who has a shelf stacking job. He won't know all the fucking codes to get into the building. What was I thinking? There's a party scene. This is actually my favourite scene, and I am sorry, animal lovers, for this. There's a party scene where two of Emma's friends are throwing a party, and one of them, Vicky, goes to like the storage room to get more alcohol. Lights go out, and she's like, what the fuck? And then something moves. She's like, what's that? And then a cat, just that whole thing, just a cat scares her. And she's like, oh, for fuck's sake, fucking cat. Cat disappears into a dark corner. She tries to get out of the room, but she can't. It's fucking Scream. Again, love letter, rip off. I'm leaning towards this way. And then she hears a noise again, and she's like, look, cat, can you stop making so much fucking noise? And then the cat comes out, is just thrown into her face, gutted. And she's like, what? And the killer just emerges from the same dark corner that the cat was in. So I killed a cat in this. I'm sorry, I love cats. If I were to go back on this, I would maybe not make Laura so impulsive to do it, and also make it more of a struggle. Not that there are scenes where she gets her ass completely kicked by this guy, but I feel like maybe it shouldn't have been so easy for her to take down the guy. But there's some stuff I like. I like Laura Lee as a character. I think she's kind of fun. I grew to like her friendship between Emma and Laura, because I think the friendship became the heart of the movie. Also, I didn't mention that the whole traumatic thing was Laura has a little bit of survivor's guilt, because a year previously her house was broken into, and it was just her and her father, and her father tried to get Laura out of the house. The father ended up getting killed by the guys who broke in. She has a little bit of guilt to that, and she thinks she was a coward for running away, even though she's a teenage girl, like, against a grown intruder. There wasn't anything she could have done, but she's been carrying around a bit of survivor's guilt. So that's kind of the motivation for her, is that someone out there is killing people and I may be able to do something about it. That was kind of her logic, even though it's kind of stupid logic. With Laura Lee, I wanted to take a teenage girl and just build her up to be a badass. That's it. And then once we get to Slasher 2, because I did outline a sequel to this, she goes full on Sarah Connor in Terminator 2, where she's a fucking warrior. And then the sequel basically becomes Aliens meets the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And then we'll see what happens in Slasher 3, because if you're going to do 2, you might as well go the whole hog and do 3. Trilogize this shit. That's it. I will decide soon what the next one should be, but thank you for coming to Slasher. If you have any thoughts or any ideas of like what I could do with this, if there's even something to salvage from this idea, I'd love to hear from you. Take care. See you pictures later. No, that's a terrible outro. What am I doing?